glad the end of the... I'm glad the end of the world's working out well for someone.
There are no people. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Yes, sorry for the little technological glitches at the beginning of there, but welcome. It is Friday, April 21st, 2023. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Friday Politics Roundup. Yes, this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Each week we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And you can support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. You can also help out this show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to leave us that 5-star review on whatever platform you listen. Leave a comment. Let folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show and amplify the amazing folks that we review or platform on this space. And yes, school board elections are coming, and we cannot let Paul Martino and his oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC. We invest in organizing, supporting local and statewide progressive candidates, unmasking toxic organizations, injecting our community with right-wing extremism, and so much more. We're putting small dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information and drop your donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. That's ragingchicken.levelfield.net. And on today's show, I think the theme for kind of coming up here is, some of you might have heard it in the when I was trying to work out the tech glitches. This might be the theme for today.
I'm glad the end of the world's working out well for someone.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. GOP House Leader Kevin McCarthy announced that his party's demands in the latest round of public hostage-taking around the nation's debt ceiling. Yes, what are those demands? Well, McCarthy and House Republicans are calling for massive cuts to social programs, the elimination of student loan debt forgiveness plan, new work requirements for welfare recipients, cuts in funds for improving the IRS. He wants to repeal the green energy programs and incentives and take back any unspent COVID funds. In other words, wants to hurt all of us, right? That's the goal. Hurt all of us and give more to that top fraction of our wealth-bearing billionaire kings. Crazy. Oh, God. And the tragedy of this week, of course, has been, it seems that flooding our communities with guns and stoking fear, hate, and misinformation on conservative media is producing yet another new form of gun violence. This week, several young people were shot and some killed as they accidentally knocked on the wrong door or mistakenly got into the wrong car. This is the culture of vigilantism that the conservatives funded by the NRA and the gun industry have been grooming us for decades. It is frightening at this point. It's frightening and it's angering. Just a kind of brief thing, just so Liberty, just this week, right? Or just in a week at Liberty, Missouri, Ralph Yarrow, of course, a 16-year-old African-American kid who's going to pick up his sister, accidentally knocked on the wrong door. He was nearly killed, right, as a kind of Fox News and kind of right-wing media infused kind of paranoia of this kind of guy behind the door led him to assume that his life was at risk because this little kid was there. picking up his sister. And in Fort Edward, New York, Kaylin Gillis, a 20-year-old white woman, was looking for a friend's house in the kind of rural area, mistakenly drove up the wrong driveway, right, at nighttime. She was shot and killed. In Elgin, Texas, 2 competitive cheerleaders, Heather Roth and Peyton Washington, were shot after mistakenly getting into the wrong car. They were just trying to, at the end of a long day, thought it was her car, got in. Oh, I'm sorry, wrong car, got back in the other car. Guy got out of the car, started shooting. Roth suffered kind of grazing wounds, while Washington was sent to the hospital in critical condition. And there's more stories like this emerging now. This is something indeed. This is something indeed. God. This week, of course, we also saw that the God, there's so much to talk about this week. It's like, whatever. Anyways, this week we saw the PA Supreme Court angrily sanctions. I'm sorry, I want to leave this before. The Supreme Court, kind of extended the kind of that ban on mifepristone that they're working its way through, of course, until this Friday. They're supposed to kind of decide today about whether mifepristone is going to be available, if the abortion pill is going to be available through the mail. Especially for women in those states that have effectively banned abortion. Right, that's going on this week. It's crazy. Let's see what else I got in here, because there's no way I can get to all this stuff. We're going to go with that. We're just going to start kind of talking in a minute, because this is just going to get crazy. Anyways, new reporting in Politico. According to new reporting in Politico, Rutgers University faculty unions are considering getting back on the picket line because the administration is dragging its feet in finalizing their framework deal that led the unions to suspend their historic week-long strike. It was the first strike by faculty in Rutgers' 257-year history. And apparently, some of the details that had not been worked out, maybe it was strategic for the administration agreeing to this kind of framework deal when they really didn't have the kind of best intentions. So we shall see. But the strike won historic victory on wages and job security for adjunct faculty. At the same time, graduate student workers and workers at Rutgers Biomedical Health were still expressing concerns about the deal, as several key issues about their working conditions remain to be hammered out. And it looks like they're back on the picket lines now. They're not on strike, but they are doing informational pickets in front of the Board of Governors, in front of the Board of Governors' homes, basically saying, get this deal done, right? You agreed for this framework deal, get the deal done. And then also in PA here, after a gun store opened near several schools in Lower Merion, PA, the Township Board of Commissioners unanimously passed a new ordinance that limits where guns can be sold in the township, starting immediately. Starting immediately, firearms businesses can no longer operate within 1,000 feet of public schools. They cannot operate out of homes. They can only operate in commercially zoned areas, and they must follow new safety regulations. Commissioner Dan Bernheim, this is quoted in Emily Rizzo's excellent reporting in WHYY, Commissioner Dan Bernheim said that the new ordinance, quote, moves the needle ever so slightly, and that's the right thing to do. Recognizing full well, and there's another quote in this article was great too as well. It's like, games get won by singles, baseball games that is. It's not always you need a home run every single time. Nope, you can actually get the signals and win the game. That's where they're at. Also, what was the other thing? Well, the Central Bucks School Board meeting that took place last night, where there's supposedly internal investigation over the charges that they discriminate against LGBTQ, in particular transgender youth. Kind of this lawsuit this kind of complaint that's being brought forward by the ACLU. Well, they just basically, cooked the books, basically hiring this kind of anti-LGBT law firm, right, religiously backed right-wing law firm, to basically make a case for discrimination. So they presented their quote-unquote findings to the board last night, and I have to admit, I did not sit there and watch the entire board meeting. I needed a little kind of mental health break from all that stuff, but I did follow a little bit what was happening on social media, and from what I'm hearing from folks who were there, it was quite a show. Let's leave it at that. Yes, and today, on Wednesday night, I don't know if you saw this one. This is kind of more in the last call version of things, our area of things. An old kind of out of commit, or kind of basically dead, right? 650-pound satellite came crashing down to Earth. Yep, it was part of the Sahara Desert, right near the Sudan and Egypt border. This is going to be more frequent, as there's been some satellites that have been up there for quite some time, and a lot of them stopped functioning. So guess what works? Guess who wins? Gravity wins. Gravity wins. Yes, indeed. And SpaceX's first test flight of its massive Starship rocket. That's the one that NASA's commissioned to run back and forth to the moon, to build their little moon bases. There was also this cool story. NASA wants to build now several moon bases, but that was also, in theory, the one that could then be used to kind of go from the moon to the Mars. Well, anyways, that massive Starship rocket, the most powerful rocket that's ever been built or launched, exploded a few minutes after launch. Yep. More of the Silicon Valley crash and burn stuff, but NASA administrators seemed kind of encouraged by it, and there were kind of big boosterism after that. So hoping SpaceX learns a lot from its failed test, and we'll go from there. But it was something. At one point, it looked like the whole rocket was going to come directly, like full on, like full thrust back to Earth. At one point, I was like, "Whoa, this could be not good." Anyways, for more PA Progressive Talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get your streams. And subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Go to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. Now you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. Subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you haven't heard, The Signal is a new podcast for the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted, is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Michaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so that we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive routes. You can check it out at buckscountybeacon.podbean.com, or you can get it wherever you get your podcast. And make sure you leave that review. 5 stars. You know how it goes. And attention to all you gamers out there. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything for retro N64s, the latest of all consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And kids get discounts so they get A's on the report cards. You can't beat it. Check them out on their Facebook page or follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn with 2 N's. Got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayman. That's with 2 N's, at SongADayman on Twitter. We got some great stuff coming up at Out the Coop Live this coming Monday. That is April 24th. It's a special 1 p.m. live show. Now, of course, that'll be available later during our regular time, but we worked it out for 1 p.m. on Monday, April 24th. I welcome Francois Furstenberg to the show. Francois is a professor of history at Johns Hopkins University. We'll be talking about his latest article in the Chronicle of Higher Education, Higher Ed's Grim, Soulless, Ed-Techified Future, Temple's Jason Wingard's Champion Skillification. Yep, he may be gone, but skillification is still running rampant through higher ed. It's going to be a great discussion. Really looking forward to that. And then on Monday, May 8th, yes, I'm still working on May 1st, still working on the May Day guest, but on Monday, May 8th, I welcome Mark Engler to the show. Engler is a Philly-based writer, author of This is an Uprising, How Nonviolent Revolt is Shaping the 21st Century. He's also a member of the editorial board of Dissent. And we're going to be talking about his latest article, Can Movements Keep Politicians from Inevitably Selling Out? That appeared in Dissent, The Forge, and Waging Nonviolence. Really looking forward to having Mark on the show, read his stuff in my classes. And now we're going to get a chance to kind of dig into this article on the show. Look, everybody, if you want a progressive future, we need progressive media. Support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a patron of Raging Chicken for as little as $5 a month. Simply go to patreon.com/rcpress. We're here for the fight, and we need you. Become a patron for the price of a good beer once a month. Help keep the media in the movement in the media. Become a patron for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. Well, welcome everybody. Look, I didn't ramble on kind of beyond my intro music. How about that? I know this is like one of these little things that just kind of plagues me for what it's worth. But yeah, you know what? I'm going to throw this out to everybody for now. I'm really curious about this. And I'm really not sure how to handle this, what to do about it. And I'm curious what other people's thoughts are on this. So I'm thinking a lot about Twitter, right? Twitter has become, as we all know, it's falling apart. I mean, let's put the shit show side of it, like Elon Musk's kind of, whatever, ego and all that kind of thing. I mean, but just even at a very practical level, not on an ideological level, on a very practical level, it's becoming less useful as a platform for getting information out, right? For sharing even this show, for following folks. I mean, I've mentioned this before on the show that, there's people who would regularly show up on my feed, which, I frankly, sometimes I just assumed that they had left Twitter. They got so fed up with it and left it, went someplace else. But it turns out, no, that they're actually still there, but it's not showing up on my feed anymore. Right. And I know that there's people have, have told me, well, you can go to that person and you could do this with it to make sure that they show up. No, and I get that. However, I've got I can't remember. I follow over, let me pull it up for a second. I mean, in terms of who I follow, I follow what? Let's see. I'm following over 2,700 people. Right. And there's there's 26, we have over 2,600 following us. Right. And so, I'm not going to go and spend a day, right, going to every 2,773 accounts and kind of okay, I want to make sure that it's just not practical. Right. I mean, why am I want to spend my time doing that stuff? Right. But it does raise a question because I know it's happening for us too as well. I mean, it's really interesting just to see. Anytime I look at analytics and stuff for this show or for other things, what I find is that it's interesting because we're getting more viewers, more people tuning into the show and the podcast and stuff, but they're not coming from where they used to come from, right? We used to get quite a few people who are coming in from Twitter, and now it's just coming from, different directions. And so I'm really thinking about, how to best make sure that we get this show out, right? That people get to see what we're doing. I mean, I'm looking at the guests that we've had on, right? I mean, and I'm just I think we're rolling right now, right? And which is fantastic, and makes me just that get to that much more, or want that much more to even get more folks kind of tuned in here. I mean, it's stuff, that interview we had with Alan Gratz, right, about his book 2 Degrees, and how his book was basically because his book focused on climate change. Kutztown University School, or the Kutztown area school district, pulled their programs. They didn't, the right wing was not wanting their kids to read about climate change. We had him on this show, and there was this event in Kutztown, and that was a freaking awesome conversation, right? We had Chris Ullery on this past week, right? Chris Ullery from the Bucks County Courier-Times. After doing this, he did this great investigative piece about looking at the ways that these right-wing law firms are influencing policy in school boards. I mean, that was freaking awesome discussion. And it's it's all that going on, and I'm seeing what's happening on Twitter, and it's got me concerned. And I've reached out to some other people that do some of this kind of work as well, and just asked them about, hey, are you noticing this too as well, or is it just kind of is it me, right? Because first I think it's my fault, right? And they're like, no, we're seeing the same thing. We're seeing the same thing, and there's shows that are have a much more national scope, are seeing the same kind of an impact. And so I'm just curious. I mean, if y'all got thoughts about, how you deal with that on the one hand, and then, are people leaving here and going elsewhere? And if you're going elsewhere, if you're not here, but if you're leaving Twitter, where are you going? Right? Because, I set up an account on Mastodon and stuff like that. Mastodon's, I find, really interesting, and I like it, but it's a different animal. Not, I guess the bird, the woolly mammoth, whatever. it's just a different animal, right? It functions differently. It has a different set of purposes and stuff. It's not, it just operates differently. So, the way that, things work there, it's not like one big platform that kind of, have a wide side, but you're working in these kind of small communities, and it's great for kind of building community and sharing stuff and all this stuff. But when you're talking about, say, promoting a show or, really following folks that you can kind of, in one place, tracking news and tracking particular stories, I just find it's not really designed for that, right? And then, of course, there's Facebook, but then, that's Facebook. I've been posting now more to Instagram, in part, which is also Facebook, or Meta. But just I'm thinking a lot about that stuff, and I'm curious where people are and if they're finding other spaces, social media spaces in particular, where they're kind of enjoying and finding it, thinking about this is a place you go once you leave Twitter, right? It just seems like Twitter is slowly going down. But that's, who knows? Maybe I'll be completely wrong. We'll find out. Anyways, on to the show. So I had some kind of things I wanted to highlight this week and kind of dig into a little bit, and then with the recognition that there's no way we're going to get to everything that happened this week, because it's been a really consequential week in my mind in different ways than before. I mean, so much of what we've seen in the over the past couple of years, we see all these big national stories going on, and now I feel like there's still some like really important national stories, but they're taking on a different shape than they have before, and so like lots of things happening in very different spaces. So. But I thought one of the most important one to look at, was you looking at what's happening with this, this debate over the debt ceiling. I mean, of course, the debt ceiling has been utilized as the national debt ceiling has been used as a tool of austerity, right? I mean, it's a tool of kind of gutting the public in favor of, privatization, austerity, military budget, and so on. And it rests, of course, as we've talked about on the show before, on a false premise, right? Is that we have, for example, there's a reason why that nobody has a big problem when the Pentagon is calling for kind of a significant increase in its budget. Right. Matter of fact, in the last budget, right, that went through, the military asked for, the Pentagon asked for, a particular number, and even like the Biden administration and then the Congress kind of gave them more than they asked for, right? And this is not talking about the specific good or bad or whatever about military funding, but it's to say that they know they're getting to spend that money, right? They know that they're going to kind of, continue to fund the military because they're making it a priority, right? And they also, I think most of them know that deep down that the national debt, for the most part, doesn't mean a whole lot, right? In part because the United States has a fiat currency, right? The fact is that we produce our own money, right? The government is the one who gives it value. Right. And that's why the government could, just like with student loans, could in one fell swoop basically saying, all right, we're going to cancel all those student loans that are owned by the government, because ultimately it's a figure on a ledger. Right. Now, I don't want to get into all the weeds on this, but, there are, and matter of fact, I have been trying for a while. Right. I gave up after a while because I'm just like, whatever, just to reach out to people. And, there's just people that do this stuff on modern monetary theory. They talk about this idea about fiat currency and so on. And that have a kind of national profile and stuff. And there's this, group of folks that you'd always go to. But I was really hoping to find somebody in Pennsylvania, right? At one of the universities in Pennsylvania that does work on modern monetary theory. And I kept on reaching out to try to find out different departments around, academic departments around it. I couldn't find people, or nobody got back to me. So I'm like, all right, forget it. I'm just going to, whatever. But I would be useful to have somebody on at that point, and maybe I will this summer for that reason, right? So in other words, like the government can just print money to cover its debts, right? And there's limits on that. You can't just do it for the, and just do it willy-nilly, right? You have to make sure that there's adequate kind of demand, and there's the money is going for something that is going to be utilized. So, for example, during the New Deal, when they spent all this money, right, government kind of just printed all this money, spent all this money, but they did things like they set up jobs programs, right? They worked on the national parks. They did, built kind of, they did electrification of rural areas. They did, all these major projects that put people to work. So the money was actually being utilized, right? It was being sucked up by the economy and kind of the expanded agenda that was going on there. So you can't just print it just for the sake of printing it. Otherwise, you do end up with runaway inflation. But the idea that, that the national budget works in the same way that a household budget works is just simply false, right? It's also, important to make the distinction between a state budget and a national budget, right? Because a state budget, they do have limits, right? The state, like or Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, can't print its own money and decide its own value. No. Right? It has to operate within kind of a budget that exists. That is not true for the national at the national level, right? So you have got that going on. So there's a reason a lot of these folks know is like, yeah, okay, we're going to say, oh my God, we're in debt, we're crushed under the national debt, we're being crushed, And meanwhile, like unemployment's at historic lows, and people are kind of earning more than they were before, and like things like this, right? So like, who's actually being crushed under this debt, right? It's all fear mongering. Right, because they know they're going to spend. They have no problem in writing kind of extensive checks to the Pentagon, because ultimately they know that money is going to get sucked up in the Pentagon's budget. Right, the Pentagon's not going to just sit on money and just kind of like hoard it. Right, they're going to spend it. They're going to buy. Republicans for the most part, really support that, and so do most Democrats. But when it comes to social programs, right, that because the right has like ramped up and fired the flames on kind of social programs and culture war stuff, that that somehow the lessons that we do the Pentagon, we completely forget. We don't consider it a national priority to make sure that kids have food, or people have medical care, or that that everyone has kind of access to schooling, or go down the list, right? And so then it becomes an issue. And, and then because of the turn that the Democratic Party took in the 90s, right, to try to kind of out-Republican the Republicans, right, a lot of those folks bought into the same austerity measures, right? And so here we are, right? And this is like, it's just replaying once again. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plans out, because like McCarthy, in order to kind of even pass this this version of the budget, right, or to get enough people on board to block, the raising of the debt ceiling, he's got to get enough of his own party on board. The problem is there's a lot of things that they want to cut that have been pretty, what's the word? Oh yeah, popular, right? They've been pretty popular. And are going to have, if they insist to making the cuts that they want, it is going to be pretty clearly on their backs. Big sign, we did it, kick me, right? So, for example, the one that's we've talked about on this show quite a bit, right? So, if you just take for starters, right? You're talking about they want to, the Republicans, according to their new proposal, right? Their hostage-taking demands. I'll just read this. This is from the Washington Post, right? The GOP plan officially aims to block Biden's forthcoming program to cancel thousands of dollars in college debt, a program long sought by cash-strapped students that the Supreme Court is also examining. Biden announced in August his plan to wipe out $10,000 in debt for Americans who earn less than $120,000 annually and $20,000 for lower income borrowers. Republicans quickly blasted the financial relief as unfair, right? So therefore, right, there's been one case that went before the Supreme Court that was that was kind of dismissed. They said nope. There's another one that's coming up that's going to challenge this too as well. But the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimated that plan would cost the government about $400 billion, right? And so they're freaking out, right? That these Republicans are freaking out, stoking the fears that this is going to put us in debt, right? Meanwhile, right, I believe that most of them know this, right? Most of them know that when you cancel $10,000 in debt, right, for our student loan debt, right, that is actually a boost for the economy. Right, because I'll suddenly say those folks who say, for example, have say up to $10,000 worth in debt, right? Say that they've been paying down their debt and they have $10,000 left, right? $10,000 left in that debt, and they're making these like hundreds of dollars of payments like every single month, right? That $10,000 goes away. Suddenly, my income is redirected elsewhere. Right? There's been study after study that shows that college debt is one of the reasons why people are postponing buying homes, or postponing starting a family, they're postponing kind of like moving out on their own, right? There's postponing buying cars. I mean, a whole bunch of other things that would potential stimulus, or even kind of participating in kind of different aspects of the party, of the country, of starting new businesses, right? All that stuff. So this is actually kind of like a stimulus, right? That would actually go back into the economy, right? And that kind of stuff. But they want to get rid of that. And it's very hard to make a case for the Republican side that they didn't do it, that it just had to be done. I mean, people are educated enough on this now that they know that, no, it can be done, right? Just Republicans want to take it away, right? And it's very clear that's what they're going to do. The other things to hear, right? They want to repeal green energy programs, including some EV tax credits, right? So that was part of this kind of Inflation Reduction Act, right? The kind of whatever, the Manchin kind of watered down compromise position of Build Back Better, right? The Republicans hated it, right? But, if you're basically going to say you're going to repeal that, suddenly there's people out there, they're looking at kind of like, whoa, seeing that there's all these credits to go green, right? Because, look, people are looking for ways to actually make an impact, to have, saying, okay, we're doing the right thing when it comes to climate change. Right. But no, they want to get rid of the $4,000 in credits for used vehicles, right? Use electric vehicles, and phase out some of the kind of $7,500 credits for new electric vehicles. Right. So they want to get rid of that. Why? Because they want to keep burning fossil fuels, because the oil companies want them to keep burning fossil fuels. Right. So they want to prevent the development of these aspects of our economy, right, towards producing more electric vehicles. And again, there's a separate conversation to say. If you look at the original Build Back Better plan, right, the original Build Back Better had a lot more money in there for public transport and kind of trains and things like this, which is where the money should be spending kind of dramatically. However, given where we're at, right, $7,500 credit for kind of new electric vehicles, right? And they have to be produced to a certain kind of certain percentage within the United States, right? Is an economic development program as well as a climate program, right? Because basically we've already seen the auto industry beginning to get on board with electric vehicles on their own, right? And now what do they need? Well, look, you give them a little incentive that basically say like, no, we're basically going to give cars a $7,500 subsidy, which will bring the kind of sticker price down, so people are going to buy more of them. That's the classic recipe. This goes back to what Henry Ford knew, right? He said, you want to produce a car, you got to produce a car that the people who are working there can buy, right? Right now, electric vehicles are still expensive, right? But if you get that price down and you're producing it in America, you're producing, now there's more people being employed at good paying jobs, and the people on the consumer end of stuff, they can actually buy something that's going to help with the climate, right? And again, putting everything in brackets here, like, because we know that that's not sufficient. We know that electric vehicles, the money is better spent if you're public transportation. All that is true, but that's not where we're at. We don't have they're not trying to cut those money because they already got rid of that money. But right now they're going after what's left. So that's absolutely kind of critical. That's absolutely critical. Yeah, Kirsten, go ahead. Lift what you want. Kirsten's saying, sorry to be off topic, but wanted to lift this. We'll kind of, when she puts that in, I'll let you know what it is. Yeah, so that's some big deals. But then look at the attacks. Like, look at where the kind of the bulk of the attacks come, right? The main things what they want to do. Just listen to this. Doesn't blow my mind. It just reminds me of who these people are. Right? They've showed us who they are, right? So one thing they want to basically have, let me see, get the number. They want to basically have $130 billion in spending cuts, right? How do they want to do that? They basically say that we have to pin federal spending back to 2022. We have to roll back kind of the spending and cuts, right? Which means, right, the spending reductions would probably target federal healthcare, science, education, climate, energy, labor, and research programs, while leaving untouched the Pentagon and services for veterans. But the bill does not specify the exact agencies or programs for the chopping block, right? Leaving the task to lawmakers on Congressional Appropriations Committee who craft the spending bills to keep the government running to stave off the shutdown, right? So they wanted their cake and eat it too, right? They basically want to say we're going to pass these huge cuts. At the same time, they're going to say, look, we're not going to tell you what to cut, right? Because we don't want to be held responsible for kind of cutting Medicare, for cutting Social Security, for cutting education, for cutting climate stuff, for cutting, say research into vaccines or whatever it might be, right? But so they want to do it. So it's going to come out of social programs, right? Because that's the area where that's been contested, right? That's the area that we have decided as society that we can kind of play with people's lives there in those public spending, that we don't see that as a priority and a necessity. And by we, of course, I mean the freaking people that are sitting in kind of like in our Congress. So then not only do they want that, not only do they want to roll back to 2022, but they also have want a cap on any growth in federal agencies' future budget at 1%. So there could be no more than 1% budget. So if inflation is at 2% or 3% and 4%, right, they want to cap it at 1%, which means basically organize systemic cuts for the foreseeable future. That's what they're arguing for here. And here you go. Who else is being attacked? Of course, the poor. Because they're the ones, right? They're the ones causing all the problems. They want to put in new work requirements for welfare. But here, look how disgusting this is. Millions of low-income Americans who receive food stamps and health insurance from the federal government would have to work longer hours in exchange for benefits under the new GOP bill. First, the bill targets the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP. It would subject adults without children to new work requirements until they reach age 56, replacing current law, which only imposes those rules until 49. So if you want to eat, you got to work longer. Right? We're not going to do anything to mandate a living wage, right, in terms of kind of what employers have to pay, right? And matter of fact, we saw new law being passed in Arkansas, and now there's another one in Iowa, which are opening up, kind of rolling back child labor laws, allowing for kids as young as 14, but they're not even required to show papers, so you don't even know if they're actually 14, but to work in meat packing factories, slaughterhouses, other kinds of factories. We're literally rolling back the 20th century. Step by step by step by step. Rick Smith has been saying this for, God, at least a decade. That's what the plan is, right? Read Jane Mayer's book on dark money, and you'll talk to, this goes back to those super uber rich folks, right, who were so pissed off by FDR and the New Deal because it put restrictions on their ability to kind of accumulate massive amounts of profit and exploit whoever the hell they wanted. And they wanted to be able to do whatever the hell they wanted to be able to do. So, I mean, that's it. So they're going after the poor. They're going after climate provisions, right, which we desperately have to have if we're going to have some sort of livable future. Here's Medicaid, right? In Medicaid, meanwhile, Republicans propose a rule requiring low-income recipients of federal health insurance to satisfy certain income or work thresholds. That includes, for example, participating in 80 hours per month in employment or community service. Otherwise, states would remove those enrollees from the safety net program, right? What about folks who can't work that time? What about folks who, I mean, are you kidding me? So that means you have to work at least 20 hours a week. What if you're sick? I don't know. The Center for Budget and Policy Priorities predicted that more than 10 million people could be kicked out of the program for Medicaid, amounting to 1 in 4, or I'm sorry, SNAP, I'm sorry, my bad. 1 in 4, well, it goes right across the board. 1 in 4 current SNAP beneficiaries, so 25% of SNAP beneficiaries who are getting help to help them feed themselves so they don't go hungry, would lose benefits. In the case of Medicaid, GOP-led states would introduce similar work mandates in the past, only to see enrollment fall, right? So there you go. If you can't enroll, if you can't meet those work requirements, then you're going to lose your benefits, so you don't enroll anymore. And the state goes, oh, look at that. We're balancing our budget off the backs of the poor. And it goes on. But that's, I mean, this is the perfect example. I love the other one too. Is the only one what I'll mention is that they want to cut funds for reforming the IRS. Right? This is like one of the most insidious little moves, right? Because the IRS is, look, the IRS is a huge bureaucracy. There's some things that there's quite a few things that they are frustrating. There's, it doesn't work as well as it could, and so on, right? So say, okay, we're going to modernize this. We're going to kind of work making sure that we have enough people to cover this stuff to make that process simpler, right? Because the Republicans know, right? Let's Democrats know too as well. Republicans know, right? If the IRS works poorly and is frustrating, guess what? People are going to hate taxes more. Right? If you don't have a good experience, you have a good customer service experience with the IRS, right? You're going to get frustrated and you're going to hate the government that much more, and therefore that feeds into the GOP agenda, right? That's the classic move of human created shock doctrine, as Naomi Klein would always write. Right? Kirsten, I think I'm missing part of a post, right? As it said, and we want him to return it and not charity wash it. For some reason, I think like one of you, the first part of your comment did not make it into the chat for some reason. If you want to put that back in, or have a link to something that you want me to show me, let me know and I'll kind of boost it up. Now, the other big thing that happened this week in ways that were I found just devastating, especially is the way, this happened like boom, boom, boom. I say boom, 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 but I mean, what, Kirsten, where did you send it to? Not sure. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do too many things at once. So we just, we saw, Ralph Yarl, a 16-year-old African-American kid. He was going to, I don't know why, Kirsten, it's not showing up. If you can message me on Twitter or send it to my email, that'd be great. And I'll kind of read it there. I'm not sure why it's not showing up here. Ralph Yarl, 16-year-old African-American kid, going to pick up his sister, right? Went to the wrong address, knocked on the door, and to a simple mistake like that led to him nearly getting killed. And more has come out like since then. The guy who shot him, Andrew Lester, he's an 84-year-old. His grandson has been speaking out and basically saying that, Lester, his grandfather, went down the right-wing media rabbit hole and became increasingly, more extreme, more paranoid, more fearful, more racist. And he would have Fox News on all day long. And he used to have a kind of relationship with his grandfather, and it would be very difficult to do because of his paranoia. The guy had everything wired up. He had security cameras all over his house, right? So he had these security cameras and things like this. So not only did Ralph Yarl, right, not only knocking the wrong door, but the guy actually saw him coming right on his security cameras, right? So he knew exactly that this is a 16-year-old kid, even though he said in court he was afraid, or first statements, I'm sorry, were so like, oh, I was afraid he was like this 6 foot, like 6'3", black guy coming to me. Ralph Yarl's like 5'8" and skinny, right? But it shows you the distortion, right? It shows you the distortion of the fear that is, and the hate that is being perpetrated and perpetuated on Fox News, OAN, and these other right-wing media networks. And, this is only kind of consistent. They're only going to kind of continue. Then we saw Kaylin Gillis, right? A 20-year-old white woman, right? She was looking for a friend's house. And if you see the pictures that they had of like the area where this takes place, it was a rural area, right? And they talked about this guy's property. We talk about this guy's property, and it basically said he's got a kind of like a wide end to his driveway. It goes up this kind of, kind of dirt and crushed stone kind of driveway. And some of the neighbors said, yeah, there's other people who have actually thought that was a road in the past because, you can't really see the house. So you have this, this girl, like, I think she's with her boyfriend, if I remember correctly. Goes up the driveway. She's looking for a friend's house. It's in the dark, right, to this rural area. If you ever been in like rural areas, right, in the dark on these kind of roads, it's hard to figure out where the addresses are sometimes, right? So she's looking to see if realize, nope, that's not the right one. Starts to turn around, and this guy from the deck, from his porch, starts shooting at the car. Kills her. And then Elgin, Texas, right? You saw this story too, I'm sure. Two competitive cheerleaders, Heather Roth and Peyton Washington, right? They're coming home from this long kind of competition, and there's like, use this one parking lot for carpooling, where they did practices and stuff. And apparently we're kind of getting out of one car, and she thought she was getting into her car or her friend's car, whatever it might be, right? Goes there, realizes her mistake. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. Jumps back out, gets back in the other car. The guy whose car she mistakenly got into gets out with a gun and starts shooting at them. Luckily, no one was killed in this one. Although Peyton Washington, right, she's in the hospital in critical condition. I mean, this is just like, there is no like other conclusion than, if you take, let me put it this way. I was listening to Chris Hayes' show last night as I was walking my dog. I was listening to kind of on the podcast version of it or whatever. And I wish I could remember the guy's name. I was thinking about talking about this guy today, so I didn't write it down. Anyways, but his interview, and it really captured what he was saying. Really captured for me what the issue is. It's like we're in this middle of this massive experiment. I mean, there's multiple different kinds of experiments, right? That are whatever this country is doing that have just never been done before. I mean, you think about what we did with COVID. Whatever, we got the means, we've got the knowledge, we've got the ability, but we're just going to kind of like whatever the hell, let people die and see what happens, right? It's horrific, absolutely horrific, right?
People remember.
Sorry about that. I was just trying to see if they have the. No, they don't have his thing. But anyways, we say, this massive thing. We don't have any kind of Jamal Bowie, I think is who it was. As a commentator, Washington Post maybe. But yeah, it was him. Jamal Bowie was on, and he said, look, the experiment is like, what do you do when you just start massively arming a population? You massively arm the population, and then you tell a population that their neighbors are their enemies, that people are coming to get them. In most cases, it's black people are coming to get you, as how the right-wing media goes, right? You've basically effectively kind of cornered part of the market where you can keep people inside that media bubble so that all they think about is like crime is going like insane, and that everybody is coming to your house to kind of kill you and rob you. So you need to arm up again, and you need to protect yourself against the other people who have the guns too as well, right? So you just massively like dump guns into the society, and you build distrust between people in that society. I mean, the logical conclusion of that story is that people are going to kill more of each other. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else that story ends, right? And I was just thinking about that. It's like, yeah, it really is. It's like, you follow out particular tendencies. And this is, I've said this on the show before too. Some of the best science fiction or speculative fiction works with that idea, right? You take a scenario and something that's, in existence now, a problem, a contradiction, something that is troubling, and you extend that logic out into the future, right? And to, kind of like blow it up a little bit so you can see it as a way of reflecting back upon the present. And this is kind of what we're in the process of doing. I mean, I can't foresee the end of the story or another storyline other than people shooting more of other people. I mean, guns are designed to kill, right? I mean, you can tell me all you want. Like, well, no, it's not to kill, it's to defend. Well, it's defend in what way? Right? I mean, the purpose, right? It's manufactured with a purpose, right? If it was just for defense, it would be a shield, right? Or some armor, right? That's, defense, right? No, it's designed to kill people or kill people, animals, whatever you're talking about, right? That's the purpose of it. So if you use it as it's intended to be used, then people die. And then if you put in a layer on top of that, which is basically saying, and we're seeing these laws being passed in state after state after state, right? We saw the stand your ground laws, right? That were, that have been passed to basically give people the right, to basically saying, we're going to take that castle doctrine, right? You have the right to defend yourself inside your castle. And we're going to say, oh no, your castle is you. So you as the individual of the castle. So anywhere that you go, if you feel threatened, you have the right to kind of shoot and kill people. Defend yourself. And all you don't even need a real threat. You just need a perceived threat. And we see cases, people are being, well, he was afraid. He was afraid, therefore it's okay. Sucks for the dead person, but I mean, this is like, what world is this? What world is this? So that's where we go. Anyways, we can take a quick break. We're going to come back. I'm going to check the DM for stuff that Kirsten sent me, and I want to talk about some stuff happening in PA, and then maybe some fun stuff to close it out. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. We're going to be right back after this quick break. My bad. Thank you, Nick. I was coming back. I was too preoccupied with the DM from Kirsten. Just saying that, yeah, I don't understand why your comments were not showing up on my screen, because it looks like it was showing up on your screen in the chat. That's bizarre to me. That I don't know that has happened before. So who the heck knows? But this is what Kirsten had sent out. Okay, so let's see. Democratic Jewish Outreach of PA calls for Brian Fitzpatrick to return $27,806 he received from Nazi artifacts collector Harlan Crow. And Indivisible Bucks is backing that call, right? And we want him to return it and not charity wash it. And as Fitzpatrick, as is Fitzpatrick's habit with dirty donations. It's what he did with Elliot Brody's money, Steve Wynn money, and Giuliani's Russian pals money. All right. So yeah, absolutely. So if people have found that, if people have seen that, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Call on it 100%. Make sure that this guy that kind of returns it, rejects it, and not just kind of like, oh, okay, we're just going to donate it to charity. Right. This is should be a complete disavowal of any kind of like alliance or that really publicly for that. So see. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Kirsten. Thank you for that. Yeah, so I'll say a couple things here. As we've seen in Rutgers University had its first ever strike, faculty strike and graduate worker strike. And that's the first one in Rutgers' 257-year history. So it's a pretty big deal. If you recall, in 2016, ABSCUF, which represents the faculty members of the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education, went on our first ever strike, but we had only been around since 1983 as an entire system. So this is a big deal at Rutgers, and it was also a big deal because there were several unions, several locals basically that were on strike together. So you had graduate student unions, you had the adjunct faculty, you had the union represented the biomedical health center, the workers there, right? So this is a big deal, right? So they all were on strike kind of in support of each other, right? The whole idea is like one faculty, right? That's the idea, right? This is like solidarity is where you have, like, we all go together and we stay until everyone's got what they need, right? That's what you want. Well, this past week, they just came to this like new framework deal, right? And they agreed to cut the or suspend the strike. Or they didn't call off the strike. They didn't say the strike is over, right? Basically, what they did is they said, okay, we're going to suspend the strike because you're giving us. We're going to do a good faith thing here, right? That's basically what it is. We're going to do a good faith thing. What's the good faith thing? The good faith thing is we're going to say that, okay, it sounds like this is an agreement that we can get behind. The details are not worked out yet, but we're in a good faith, kind of a show of good faith. What we're going to do is we're going to say, all right, we'll take the framework. We all agree on what that framework should be, right? And then we'll work out the details afterwards. And meanwhile, we'll get back to the classrooms and students can get back to their classes to make sure that you're not disrupting education or the graduation, things like this. Great, excellent. But that depends upon there being real action and real trust, right? I mean, so if you're going to have a framework deal, right, that means that, you have to work out the details. And so that, as they always say, right, this is the cliche that it never gets old, right, that the devil is always in the details. Well, here, it looks like what the part of the devil in the details here is delay, right? So there was a report in Politico that came out yesterday, I believe. Yep, yesterday, and I'll just kind of read you the opening stuff here. It says, Rutgers University faculty unions are expressing frustration with the pace of finalizing contract negotiations with the university, with a possible strike resumption looming. Rutgers resumed classes on Monday after a historic faculty strike, which included 9,000 workers in 3 unions, impacting Rutgers' approximately 67,000 students. Faculty unions and Rutgers officials negotiated in the State House for 5 days after Governor Phil Murphy kind of intervened. right? It says, but while both sides reached a framework deal, unions have described the Rutgers University administration as being slow moving on finishing it since negotiations resumed in New Brunswick. Quote, we got to New Brunswick and it's been the same tricks. Slow bargaining, not responding to critical demands, playing whatever foolish, stupid games they've been playing. Todd Wolfson, vice president of the Rutgers AAUP AFT, said in an interview, quote, so yes, we are pissed off and we are asking ourselves what we need to do and what's going to need to happen before the semester ends in order to get the contract that we need, right? Bravo, Todd Wolfson, for not pulling punches on this. Now, with strike suspended, not permanently over, union leaders are discussing going back to the picket line. Amy Heiger, president of Rutgers PTLFC AAUP AFT, which represents part-time lecturers, and it is saying possible strike may resume, although she said it was hard to gauge how likely it is, right? Quote, we're kind of feeling like the old intransigence is back now, and now that we're back in New Brunswick, she said in an interview. We could resume the strike. We could reserve that right. As workers in Rutgers, we didn't end the strike. We just suspended it, and it was conditional upon that trust, right, that you were going to have it. And, I have to say, that trust was, that was a lot to swallow to begin with, like given the fact that Rutgers, the administration there, had done pretty much everything it's done to break trust with faculty and kind of academic workers at Rutgers. So, there you have it. I mean, so we're at this point. And the framework deal, and, one of the things you can see, you look at some of the details in their framework deal. Let me see if I can pull this up. Sorry. I thought I had this up. Yep. The framework deal provided some really good and fairly substantial, solid things for particular groups of faculty, right? This is I don't want to say this is definitely the case, but it has that taste of, okay, we're going to try divide and conquer now. What happens if we offer this group some stuff, but, make another group of workers look like they're the problems, right? But there were some historic gains, right? So for example, this is from NorthJersey.com. They said when they came to the framework agreement, there were union leaders who came out, right? Basically, Brian Sachs, that quote, is the leader of the union, represented the adjunct faculty. He called, say, it was his quote, historic compensation gains that are ready to go, that are going to total nearly 44% in the life of the contract, unquote. The increases amount to almost 30% in the first year of Rutgers, quote, very low paid part-time lecturers, unquote. Sachs said in an interview, right? So that's good, right? I mean, that's a positive gain, right? But they also said, right, that from the adjunct union, because of the pressure of time, there was many outstanding issues that still needed to be resolved, and if we're not, and if they're not, we could find ourselves back on the picket line, just as we were just talking about, right? So what are some of those issues? Pay equity, like diversity demands, and some other social justice demands that are kind of not hammered out, right? And it should be important to note that those were part of the demands that were integral to the strategy around organizing, right? About connecting with the community, about building like broad-based connections, of building solidarity in a very real way, right? Not basically saying, we're just going to look at compensation for particular groups of people, we're going to forget about all these other demands. No, so we're going to deal with all of this stuff, right? And because of that labor coalition, right? I'll read again another part from this. Becky Given, president of the union representing full-time Rutgers faculty, the AAUP/AFT, they said the labor coalition had achieved, quote, unprecedented gains for contingent workers, graduate students in our communities, right? That was a big thing, right? Adjuncts are also going to see kind of significant improvement in on their job security provisions, right? What's the details, right? Some of the problems, right, is that the details of what was going to go to graduate student workers, right, about how many years were they going to be able to get that fifth year of guaranteed funding, right, or PhD, were they going to have to teach additional classes to get that compensation, right? The union saying no, the administration, that's what they wanted, but those details are not worked out. So you got graduate student workers who are just kind of like, I don't know about this, right? And, look, there has been a long history, right, and especially in faculty unions, of tenure track faculty selling out either adjuncts or graduate student workers, right, for their own benefit. Now, that has changed dramatically, right, in the 21st century, right? We have started, I mean, it didn't happen all at once, But where we are now, right, and this was true during Abscuff strike in 2016, and it's even, I think, more true in the Rutgers strike, right, is that the recognition that, no, we know this divide and conquer strategy, right? We know that if we sell out that group, right, it's ultimately going to come for us, right? So even at the level of self-interest, right, even at the level of self-interest, those tenured faculty know kind of like what the game is, right? And it's true. If you don't protect the most vulnerable among your community, right, not only are you have a moral problem, right, but you're ultimately cutting out your own legs, right? Especially when you're talking about from the perspective of workers. That is how you survive as a community, and a strong community, right? You just don't basically, throw like members of your family, so to speak, to the wolves so that you get to eat that night, right? I mean, come on. So this is amazing. I mean, this is absolutely amazing. There's so much that I think we're learning and going to continue to learn about this Rutgers strike. Frankly, I've reached out to some folks and going to come back at that too, see if I can get some folks from Rutgers to come on the show. I'm really hoping to see that. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Just so you know, for folks listening, if there's anything that you are posting to comments and you're not seeing me respond to, shoot me, DM me on Twitter. Let me know, because I after what Kirsten says, I'm a little bit paranoid that there's something going on there. Anyways, here's some good news on the guns front. This happened in Lower Merion Township. There was a store that basically opened up, a gun store, opened up in a section like that was kind of close to schools, right? So there was a company called Shot Tech, right? That this happened last year. They opened up a gun shop close to one of the commissioner's homes in Ballyssinwood. But it was also near several schools, right, including Sinwood Elementary School and Ballyssinwood Middle School. And so residents started a petition requesting the township to close the business, and it gathered more than 3,000 signatures. And this, we find that this just happened. The Board of Commissioners passed an ordinance that basically said, okay, we're going to shut it down. Right, basically, or say we're going to prevent this. Right, we're basically saying that no, you cannot operate in a residential district. You cannot operate out of your personal home. Right, if you're selling guns, you cannot operate within 1,000 feet of a school. Right, and it has to be within this commercial districts. Right, there you go. And I think the commissioners were, they understand what's up. Right, so they said, look, we're going to take a step in a direction. All right, this is not as far as we'd like to go or as we think we should go. This is what we think we could do right now, so we're going to do it, right? And it doesn't mean it's over. Doesn't mean we're going to stop, kind of looking for ways to kind of curtail gun violence and just kind of curtail just like flooding our streets with weapons. No, we're going to take a step in that direction. And this is a big deal. Now, I would be surprised if we don't see some lawsuits start coming out of this, right? So pay attention. Right, because this is going to be like, again, this is about, does a community have the right to keep itself safe? Does a community have a right to kind of regulate, right? Kind of this kind of violence, right? And of course, the NRA and the gun lobby is going to say absolutely no, because we want to sell more weapons, and the only way to do that is to make sure that we flood our streets and make it as easy as possible for people to get their hands on them. Why can't your neighbor kind of be selling AR-15s out of their garage? So there you have it. So kudos to the folks at Lower Merion for passing that. And my hope is that we're going to see this happening in additional districts. I remember when I used to live in Allentown, right? And I was this just blew my mind at the time. There was Ed Pawlowski, right, was the mayor at that time, and there was this incident, right, where basically somebody had set up in their backyard, right? And this is, this is the section of Allentown, right? Just kind of like, that wasn't near where I lived, but, it was kind of like the same thing. Lots of row houses, right? We're talking about row houses. We're not talking about like big open expanse. We're talking about row houses, right? So somebody in a row house, like in their little backyard, had set up a shooting range, right? And justifiably so. Neighbors and people are like, what the hell you think you're doing? You can't be shooting off like guns like this as a shooting range, right? And so I can't remember how far it got, but the city council basically banned you having a shooting range inside, the city limits. No, you can't do that in your backyard, right? Why? Well, there's kids, there's people, right? All you need is one little ricochet and you could kill your neighbor, right? I mean, it was as simple as that, right? And it passed, like, people are like, yep, absolutely. But then guess what happened? Republicans and the NRA threatened to sue the city, right? And they said that we are going to sue you. You cannot do that with, because it's a violation of the Second Amendment, which again, hadn't been tested. But what happened? Did Allentown fight that? Nope. They were so worried that they were going to be taken to court and they're going to have to fight a lawsuit. They're going to have to spend money that they got rid of the ordinance. Freaking nuts, right? And that's been the pressure so far, right? The NRA has basically done this. The gun lobby has done this. Republicans have done this as a way of kind of pressuring communities into making themselves less safe, so that those industries, right, those businesses who make a product that is designed to kill get to make more money. That's where you go. It's the same logic. That's why the gun lobby is terrified of what happened in the tobacco suit, right? Because they know, like, look, a cigarette, if it's used as it's designed to be, will give you cancer. It's not like a fluke if you use it in a way that it's not supposed to. No, if you use it as it's designed for its purpose, it will give you health problems and cancer. And when you know that, and you then lie about it, or you try a little PR move to try to direct people's attention away from the fact that it kills you, right? In the end, what they did with the tobacco industry, they finally held them accountable and said, no, you are going to pay for your lies. Right? Now, we didn't ban cigarettes entirely. Right? There's a lot more restrictions on what they could do. We got, all this other kinds of stuff. You cannot push it to kids. You cannot do all this other kinds of things, right? You have to have labels that say this is, there has to be a certain age. You have to go, all that kind of stuff. With guns, right? It's not a slow death like cancer, right? It's immediate. Boom, you're done. And then you couple that, you can say this thing about Fox News, right? Or right-wing media. If you use that media the way it's designed to be used, you become a racist, right? And if you then, and at the same time, the same people that encourage you to be hateful and become racist or hate LGBTQ people, the same people are telling you that you need to get a gun to protect yourself from these people, right? You're using it as designed. You should be held accountable. Those people should be held accountable. Not so that, and the worst part about it is it's so much, it's for freaking money. Yeah, there's people that are kind of ideologically aligned with those extreme positions. But when it comes down to it, most of it is about money. We're willing to sacrifice our kids for money. Make our communities more unsafe. So these, not even money for everybody, so that those people, that small group of people, get to kind of extract more money from us while we shoot each other. It's just freaking nuts. But yeah, so kudos to the folks in Lower Merion Township for pulling this off. I know that the struggle is going to continue. There's going to be fights kind of moving forward, but holy moly, here we go. So I know that there was a lot of stuff that happened at the Central Bucks School Board last night. if you hold on. I'm sorry. I just wanted to that the ACLU has been putting out a bunch of stuff on this, and they were just like livid at to hear what the Central Bucks school boards hired kind of religious fundamentalist lawyers try to pull off as an investigation about their discriminatory acts. I look forward. I'm going to talk about more about this next week. I've been playing around with trying to get. I'd like to have somebody come on and talk specifically what's happening on Central Bucks, and I might even do something where on Monday we might even have like a double show, because I'm having Francois Furstenberg on. We're doing that special 1:00 time for the for his show, and then maybe we get something on to talk about what's happening on Central Bucks. If not, maybe on the first, we're going to see. But I think it's time we got to dig in what's happening with that law case. So much has happened, and like, look, I mean, parents are organizing, communities are organizing to try to kind of beat this stuff back. And it's just, it's overwhelming how that school board is seeking to transform that school district. I mean, thank God you have at least 2 people on that school board, that are, 2 to 3 people on that school board, that, whatever. I don't want to say are sane, because then it's not just sane, but that are kind of not committed to destroying, public schools. So, and that's true right now. So hopefully, that some of these lawsuits are actually going to have effect, and some of these people who have been funding this hate and extremism in the schools are going to be held accountable, for their actions. So we shall see. I was thinking I had a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to, that I was thinking about talking about, but I think it's going to be too much for the day. So we shall see. A couple of things that happened. I could just say, on the side, one, I don't know if you saw about this, but a Wednesday night, there was a satellite that stopped functioning, that for a while, and it was about 660-pound satellite came crashing down to Earth. NASA was not sharing its information about where it was going to come crashing down. Right. Which is, I guess, like, okay, I can see you don't want people rushing out to that site to try to kind of be there for it and have it come down on it. But at the same time, don't people need to know? Right. But it crashed down at the border of Sudan and Egypt. And here, and, it was like the more, I think we're just getting to that point in time when there's been some satellites who've been in orbit for quite some time. Gravity's going to win that battle. Especially, ones who are no longer functioning properly. You can no longer adjust them or anything like this. They're just going to come back to Earth, especially ones that are that big that are not going to burn up in the atmosphere. So we'll see more of that. In the move fast, break things world, the Silicon Valley elite like Elon Musk, we saw what SpaceX did. Yeah, another one of its famous ways of testing things was to just blow stuff up. So SpaceX's first test flight of its massive Starship rocket exploded a few minutes after its launch. Now, you remember a couple years ago, they were testing just the base of the Starship, right? So, or I shouldn't say the base. They were testing just the flight part of the top of it's like actually the top of the rocket, the one that actually the people go into, right? They were testing that, and there was a series of explosions when they were trying to get it to come down and land, and the thing blew up. They blew up several times. Like, who knows how many billions of dollars have been spent on this. I think just, NASA had spent $3 billion just for this one. So, but anyways, so this one was the full stack, right? So you had this massive rocket, like the most powerful rocket that's ever been built, was underneath the Starship module. And, the idea is that this, unlike what we just saw with the Orion program, which we saw the ULA rocket go up, that previously was the most powerful one ever built. That one was successful, of course, that we saw. That is going to do the next the lunar landing, the next lunar landing coming up. But anyways, that one went up, And this was going to be, the SpaceX rocket was going to be even more powerful, right? And so this goes up, and because the ULA stuff is not reusable, SpaceX builds reusable stuff. So if you're going to do space exploration, this is a better way to do it ultimately, because you're not just kind of wasting all that, spending it and wasting it. You're reusing some of the parts, as we've seen. So this was the first kind of full stack, and then it made it up. After about a minute and a half or so, it seems like it stopped, wasn't kind of moving in the right way. At one point, it seemed to start turning, and then it went into like a slow spiral, right? And then at one point, it was actually headed down, like towards Earth, right, with the rocket still going. But then it kind of like adjusted and turned around, and it kept on going in these circles. Right. So clearly they weren't able to get separation between those two. Some of the rockets, the engines kind of cut off, and they ultimately had, I believe they basically, flicked the switch on the kind of the destruct sequence, so that, the thing wouldn't come crashing down at full speed and hurt people. So that was that. Another big boom for Elon. There you have it. So anyways, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of like fading here. I'm telling you, I've had quite a week, and I find myself it's only like 11:30, and I'm kind of fading. And I don't know about you, but my allergies have been absolutely horrible this week, and I can start feeling it now. Like my eyes are starting to water again, my headache is coming back, and I'm in my basement, so there you go. Anyways, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and want to remind you that on Monday we'll be talking to Francois Furstenberg. We're going to be talking about his awesome article called Higher Ed's Grim, Soulless, Ed-Techified Future. And that is basically the article. It's also timely because of the Temple University strike. And Jason Wingard, who was the university president there, less than 2 years, there was a vote of no confidence coming out against him because he had all these new fancy ideas, right? Sounds like this chancellor of the state system of higher education. Right? Yeah, exactly. But anyways, he had all these fancy ideas. We championed this thing called skillification in terms of transforming higher education. He used anti-labor union practices against graduate students who were on strike. He did all sorts of things that really pissed off the faculty. They were coming forth with a vote of no confidence, and eventually he just kind of resigned. He checked out. So what this piece does, what Francois Furstenberg does, is basically looks at Jason Wingard's book, where he champions stuff on skillification and paints out this picture, this agenda for higher ed. And his argument ultimately is like, look, this is good to understand. See what he's doing in his book. Not because Jason Wingard, right? Yes, he's gone from Temple, but the agenda that he articulates in this book is precisely the agenda that we're seeing in places like the state system of higher education through Dan Greenstein. And we're seeing it other places kind of across the country in higher education that's seeking to basically replace people with these kind of like apps and kind of technique solutions and things like this. So we're going to get into that on Monday. That's Monday at 1 p.m., special time at 1 p.m. Of course, after that, it will be posted for everybody to see. You can tune in live just like you would with our regular show at 7 p.m. But as soon as we're done, it'll be up and available for if you can't make the 1 p.m. And then again on Monday, on May 8th at 7 p.m., I'm welcoming this guy to the show. This is an Uprising. That's Mark Engler. His book, This is an Uprising, Nonviolent Revolt is Shaping 21st Century, is something I actually use in some of my classes that we talk about that stuff. My class on activist writing media, we look at this as a way of kind of thinking what's happening with social movements. He's also he's on the editorial board of Dissent. But we're going to be talking about his latest article called "Can Movements Keep Politicians from Inevitably Selling Out?" It's a really cool piece, right? It was just published in Dissent, The Forge, and it's also on Waging Nonviolence. And that piece is basically asking the question: is like, well, how do we understand, first of all, a little bit about what happens to politicians, right? Even ones that seem to have good intentions, when they, you get inside the DC circle and you get it subjected to a series of incentive structures that kind of move you in one direction or another, right? And so, Mark Engler has been writing a lot about social movements and kind of like social movement strategy for quite some time. He and his brother, Paul Engler, kind of wrote that book, I should say. I should give Paul Engler credit too as well for This is an Uprising. And in this piece is basically looking at some of Noam Chomsky and Edward Herman's kind of framework that they put together in Manufacturing Consent when thinking about what happens in the media, see what is actually happening in internal politics. And then, right, not just kind of looking at analysis, but then saying, well, this is where kind of social movements become really critical. And I think this is a really important conversation, especially as you have some segments of the quote unquote left, right? People like Jimmy Dore, who it's just like have done so much damage, right? And just like because of his own craven interests. But who just believe that, you know, the minute that someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez doesn't make every single vote they want or does what they say, that then she's sold out, right? And so you have those people who are always going to be, you know, it's going to be the cancelers that are just going to like, oh, if you're not perfect, then we're gonna call you a sellout, and then we're going to be against you, right? So there's that group of folks, but then there's also kind of like, this is the first time, at least in my lifetime, where we've had actually a group of representatives. Right, we call them the expanded squad, right? We had the squad, right? And now we have the expanded squad, kind of more people that were kind of elected in this last round of elections. We see a similar dynamic happening here in Pennsylvania, right? We have these politicians who are now kind of in office, who are elected, but came out like from kind of a movement base. And how do we think about kind of keeping that, you know, both supporting that kind of wedge that we've got in here, but also making sure that there's accountability, right, to the movements, right, and vice versa. So that's going to be, I think, a good conversation. We'll talk about him on May. That'll be on May 8th. We're still looking for our guest for May 1st, International kind of Workers' Day, but we'll get back to you on that when we have it. But anyways, this is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. Want to remind you can help support this show by heading over to patreon.com/rcpress, and you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Check it out. And let me just check on something real quick before I sign off, because I'm getting a bunch of beeps here, and I'm trying to see if this is nope. Okay. I just wanted to see if somebody was trying to get my attention, if something was wrong with chat or something like that. I didn't want to kind of like leave someone out there holding something else. So all right, everybody, have a good one. Look forward to a great discussion this coming Monday. Hope you're all kind of enjoying the weather. At least where I'm at, it's pretty nice today. Got a little rain coming over the weekend, but, you know, hey, it's all good. Hopefully I'm going to get out and do some gardening if these allergies let up a little bit. So anyways, Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. See y'all, everybody. Wish you a great weekend, and we'll see you on the flip side. See ya!
There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.